Hello there, Mad Mike here, and welcome back to the channel. So today we got news that the upcoming, they're calling it a spiritual successor to the original Candyman, which is just titled Candyman, has entered production. Now, before I go into the actual production details behind this new film, let's just recap the Candyman franchise briefly. Now, Candyman, the original, which came out in 1992, is a cult horror film that's basically about a kind of the idea of urban legends. This woman who is she's a student at the University of Chicago, and she is studying urban legends for a thesis, and she winds up coming across the legend of Candyman, and she tries to explore it and find out basically the center of it. And through this investigation, she actually finds that Candyman is not just an urban legend; he is real. And Candyman is basically he was an African American artist during who became very wealthy during the Civil War, and he wound up fathering a child with a white woman. Her father then perpetrated a lynch mob that cut off his painting hand, replaced it with a hook, and then doused him in honey after beating him severely. And he was then stung to death by bees and burned to death, and his body was burned after the fact. And now he haunts the slums and boroughs of rural Chicago because of what was done to him. And the Candyman himself in the film is played by Tony Todd, and I can't remember who the girl who plays the girl, but it's a really good film. I love the original Candyman. It is Tony Todd really makes that role, that low voice that he has, that very imposing low voice, and the way that he conducts himself as Candyman, and the visuals of that film, especially with the bees and stuff. It works very well, and the directing style is amazing. And then it had a sequel a few years later, which was not as good and not as well received. And I can't remember if there were any spin-offs or sequels after the second film. But now we have news that this new film, which is just titled Candyman, has finally entered production. Um, they have confirmed the cast. Tony Todd is actually coming back to play Candyman, which is a huge draw for me personally, because I think he did an amazing job in the original films, and I think that replacing him, especially with that very distinctive voice, would have been extremely difficult. And the fact that they were able to get him back, I think, goes to a lot towards drawing in that original fan base from the film, because the film has developed cult status over the years. Um, and the other big thing that's been drawing people in is Jordan Peele's involvement. Now, it is fair to note that Jordan Peele is not directing this outing. He is the main writer on the script. The director on the film is going to be Nia DaCosta, and she is a relative newcomer. She has not directed a lot. She has 3 film credits and a couple of television episodes to her name. And that leads me to kind of a little bit of it's not necessarily something that takes away from her credential or what will be the final product of the film, but I have a funny feeling that Jordan Peele might be ghost directing this film. This might be something where they want him working very closely with her in the directing, because he's an Oscar-winning director. If you have a chance to have him work with the production in any way, that would probably be beneficial, especially since this is a relatively new director, or relatively inexperienced director. So I think it's a high possibility that he might actually ghost direct this. Obviously, we are not going to know that until well after the fact, if that is the case. But they've described this film as basically a spiritual sequel to the original Candyman, or a uh, basically they're kind of doing what Halloween did in 2018, where they're making a sequel to the original. They're not. I don't think they're taking into account Candyman 2. And kind of the same thing that Halloween did, where they didn't take into account any of the sequels past the first film. They just took into account the 1978 Halloween, and it looks like they're going to be kind of just building off of that original story. They're going to be doing filming. I guess filming is going to take place entirely in Chicago, which makes sense. I mean, Chicago's actually used for a lot of movies. It's been used actually as a stand-in for New York in a lot of cases. It's much cheaper to film in Chicago than it is to film in New York. Um, but this is very interesting moving forward. They did confirm the remainder of the cast today. I wouldn't say anybody stands out specifically, but they all seem like they're relatively able-bodied actors. They seem like they can pull their own weight. It doesn't seem like there's anybody there who's sticks out like a sore thumb. But moving forward from that, this is an interesting film project again because Jordan Peele does know horror very well. We do know that both of his feature films, Get Out and Us, were both critical and financial successes, and having him move into this type of franchise is even more interesting because this is an established franchise beforehand. This is not an original concept, and it's gonna be interesting to see his spin on how this is gonna work. And I don't know if Clive Barker isn't what was involved in any of the production stuff for this. Um, I know that he wrote the original story that Candyman was based off of, so he is getting some kind of a credit for the character creation and stuff. Or if they're going to pull anything from the short story that other than the stuff that wasn't included in the original film. But it would be interesting to see just for compare and contrast purposes. But this is good news for this film that it is indeed moving forward. It is officially in production. They have stated that it is officially in production, and for those people that are fans of Candyman, I think this is a move in the right direction. You have a decent amount of talent behind this film. You've gotten Tony Todd back in the title role, and it goes a long way to winning over that fan base. But those are my opinions. I want to know yours. Put your thoughts in the comments. Do you think that this is a good idea to make a spiritual? You can call it a spiritual. It basically just a sequel to the original Candyman. Are you happy to see Tony Todd back and see the involvement of Jordan Peele, or is this kind of one of those things where you think the original Candyman was good enough? We didn't even really need the first sequel. Probably should just leave it alone. It doesn't need to be explored anymore. Put your thoughts in the comments again. I'd like to know what you're thinking. Hit the bell for notifications. Hit the like button. Subscribe. And remember, I live my life free of compromise. Do you?